You are a psychologist, a psychotherapist, a researcher, one of the founders of the AFTD, and you received last year in Rome the Lifetime Achievement Award from the International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation. Can you tell us a few words about the upcoming workshop in March 2021?
Yes, it would be a pleasure to meet with several French colleagues to discuss what I have started to call an active trauma therapy. Now, you may wonder, an active, what is that supposed to mean? Well, the philosophers among us, they will know that in philosophy there's a movement called the inactive perspective. And it's actually grounded also in biology and in psychology. It's a general approach. To enact means to bring forth. To have a perception, we must perceive. To have a feeling, we must feel. To think, we must engage in thoughts, right? Thus the basic idea is that I as a person, you as a person, Emmanuel, you appear when I do something. We must do something. Life is about doing something. And doing something is to bring forth a self, a world, filled with other people, with things. We must do things. And you may wonder, why would we do things at all? It's a very basic question. And I find that that question is not necessarily posed all the time. Contemplating the issue, I would say we act because we have needs, we have desires. Needs unconscious, desires conscious. We do things because we need to fulfill our longings. Thus, in this frame of thought, to act is to strive for something. I want to have that which I need. I want to get rid of that which harms me. And I don't want to be concerned with things that are of no significance to me. In this line of thinking, I would just say we are longing and striving. To act means to be able to do something. But as we all know, life is not easy. There are many forces in nature, things that other people do, and our power relative to the forces in nature and what the world brings socially is, of course, pretty limited. The more we can do, the higher our power of action is, we can say. Now, sometimes we meet situations that are so difficult that we cannot achieve our aims. That doesn't mean we do not struggle to achieve those aims, but we can find it then very hard to engage, to find the efficient actions. If we are not up to the situation that we meet, we will engage, as the philosopher Spinoza says, in passions. We become passive relative to the challenges that we meet. Pierre Journées talked about, and it's the same idea, basically substitute actions. If I don't know what to do in this very moment, I may become disorganized. That, Journées would say, is a substitute action. And I feel that symptoms are basically related to or are some substitute actions. Thus, when we meet traumatized people, we can look upon them as people who try and survive. They try to preserve their existence, but in certain circumstances, they do not actually know how to do it in the most efficient way. And thus they may engage in a panic. They may become depressed. They may, when challenged, start to hurt themselves, to drink too much. All substitute actions. Thus, being traumatized in this sense would be lacking the power of action to live life at its highest level and instead engage in substitute actions. Dissociation is one type of a substitute action. It would be better to integrate also the very difficult things that we meet in life. But if we are not up to it, we may sort of become divided in ourselves. We may develop what I call different parts of us. I now call them dissociative agents. As one dissociative agent, I may try and meet my daily life needs. As another dissociative agent, I'm stuck in defensive actions regarding the terrible things that I met in life. And the whole person may not succeed in bringing those two or more parts together to integrate them. Integrating very difficult life situations is a major, major challenge. And it can be too hard for a child or an older person. Now then, the idea of an active trauma therapy is to help the person gain power of action, to help them achieve a level of functioning that suffices in the end to integrate the horrible things they met, so that these events cease to be things of the present. They cease to be things they reenact in the present, to relive it time and time again in the present, but help them make sure that they become things of the past, so that it's part of their life history rather than a current trouble they meet. Thus, an active trauma therapy is about raising the power of action, helping the person to gain those actions that they have not been able to perform so far. And they don't do that sort of as a separate individual. Therapy is about co-enactment. We do it together. We have to do it together. The person cannot do it just by herself, just by himself. Thus, we have to meet the other person at where they are. And an active trauma therapy is very much about meeting the person where they are and taking the thing from there in a co-enactment, step by step by step, so that eventually they do succeed in integrating their being, those different dissociative agents that they may have developed, and making sure that trauma becomes the thing of the past rather than the present. And sometimes I compare this co-enactment to dancing. It's a metaphor, of course. In therapy, if all goes well, we dance together. And the therapist should develop the ability to really feel where the other person is, to feel what is possible and what is not possible yet, to feel the needs of the other person. If the therapist is up to that, they will succeed and they will feel well. They engage in useful actions. If the therapist is not up to that, if the therapist is, say, confused by the multitude of symptoms that the patient has, we observe actually lack of power of action in the therapist. Thus, part of the goal of the workshop is to help colleagues engage in higher levels of action by understanding dissociation and traumatization more, by showing how we can raise our level of action so that we are better able to meet the needs of the patient. And then if all goes well, in a step-by-step fashion, therapist and patient gain more power of action. That's, I guess, the basic idea. I could add to that one more thing. We live in times in which there is major interest in the brain. I share that interest. I also, with my colleagues, investigate brain patterns in traumatized individuals. However, just looking at the brain, I regard as far too constricted, because we are not, the inactive approach says, people living basically within our skull. The inactive approach is very much about embodiment. Of course we have a brain, but that brain is connected with a general nervous system with a body. And the way the brain works is related to the kinds of bodies that we have. And apart from that, we are not just a brain and a body, we are intrinsically embedded in a world. We are always part of a world. We are not separate from that world. We are not, so to speak, situated in a world. We are part of a world that we, in part, bring forth ourselves. There again, we have that term, to bring forth, to enact. And in a somewhat more technical way, I would say, we as subjects are always relative to our world, to the object. There's an intrinsic relativity between subjects, individuals, and their world. They are not separate. And one term that captures that idea is to say that we are embedded. That's what we have is brain, body, environment as a unity. Not as three separate factors. It's a unity. And that perspective I now like to call an ecology. We have an ecology of brain, body, and environment. And that relativity is actually not sufficiently appreciated in many approaches. For example, when we speak about information processing, it is as if we were just a brain that, like a computer, processes things. I think that metaphor is basically deeply mistaken. We are not computers, but we, in this embodied and embedded fashion, we are challenged to make meaning all the time. The world does not have a meaning in and of itself, but we must bring forth meaning. And that too is a major feature of an active trauma therapist, to find new meaning. The old meaning means trouble. I'm worthless. I was too weak. Nobody loves me, etc., etc. And we should find new meaning, such as I was confronted with an impossible environment. No child could have lived that world without becoming wounded. I have become wounded, and I am not to blame for that. I met a world that was simply too much. I suffered, I engaged in passions, and now I'm on my way evermore to find action, to find new meaning, to feel that I'm a worthwhile individual and that I know how to deal with this world that I'm living. Perhaps that is a sort of effort on my part to summarize what a rather complex approach is about. I think that must suffice for the moment.
Okay, thank you so much, Ellert. It was very clear, very, very clear. It's perfect because it's you succeeded to get into words something very complex, but trying to make it simple. So it's really great.
Thank you for that. Thus again, dear colleagues, I'm really looking forward to meeting you in live or otherwise per internet, depending on Corona conditions. Let's hope that we find the power of action to beat Corona soon.
Thank you so much, Ellert. Thank you so much.
Okay, my pleasure, Emmanuel.
Okay.